Nikki Velasco, welcome to Girl Dad, the podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for asking me
Oh,
to get on.
of course.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to have you. It's going to be fun. I actually met Nikki at a Hermosa Circle event, which is this great group of women local to the area. And we recently went on a fun strand walk where we talked about our dads and just connected instantly. And I was like, you've got to come on the podcast and share some of these stories. So Nikki is here today to talk about what she does and give you amazing advice as to how you can help your daughters, but also share incredible stories with her dad as well. So, with that, would love for you to just kick this podcast off by sharing more about what you do, your family, where you're from, all the background on Nikki.
Well, again, thank you for having me on here. And I think that conversation could have been a podcast too. I'm like, damn, we should have recorded it. But
I know.
uh, my name is Nikki Velasco. I'm a mindset coach for high achieving women in leadership positions. And my focus is on helping them overcome burnout. So it's about regulating their nervous system, overcoming stress, and just really leading a life that where there is success, but without the burnout and like strain that comes with it sometimes, especially when you're a high achiever. My family, so they're from South America. My dad is Colombian, my mom is Argentinian, so I am a first generation American. And I'm really excited to talk about my dad today because I think that there's a mixture of different culture coming in and like a perspective of like immigrant parent and raising a daughter in the States in a new culture in a new environment. And there is a lot of mindset stuff behind that as well that my dad helped with and impacted as well as my mom. But I think my dad and I have a great relationship. So I'm excited to talk on that.
Well, I'm so excited to have
Yeah.
you on. And I would love to dive a little bit deeper into the work that you do because you do coach a lot of high achieving women for a living. And there's a lot of dads out there who are listening to this podcast who have high achieving daughters who maybe have that kind of perfectionist mindset, who really put themselves um, to high standards and are maybe stressed out often or are success driven and put a lot of pressure on themselves. So, when it comes to the advice that you would give dads with these kinds of daughters, what kind of advice would you give them? How might you help their daughters' struggles and help them coach their daughters the way that you might coach the girls?
This is a powerful question. And I'm glad that you're asking it because I am the eldest daughter. So it's my brother and I, and there's a 3-year gap. And I've always taken on this role of, you know, being the high achiever. That's why I coach women like that because I went through it. I've been through the burnout. And um what I what I think would be extremely powerful for dads that are listening to this who have the daughters who are, you know, I want you to identify a high achiever. Like, okay, how do I know if my daughter's a high achiever? Well, she's the girl that's like doing all the extracurriculars. She's always hard on herself about grades and trying to get A's, even though you're probably not putting the pressure on her to do so. And it's just always this stress of like having to be the best at what they do. And maybe there's no like self-care in there really, or they don't know how to slow down. And sometimes that comes with anxiety. Sometimes it comes with a bit of depression and stress. And that when it gets to that point, it's because they don't know how to regulate themselves and how to kind of be like, okay, find a balance. And again, a lot of this is usually internal. It's not necessarily external. It's not like these external pressures of like, you have to do XYZ from parents. Sometimes it is. But if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, well, I don't put this pressure on my daughter, but she puts it on herself. Like, how do I help her? Um, there, as an adult, I had gotten to these points of burnout. And even as an adult, my dad has helped bring me back out of it. So my advice to dads who are fathers to high achieving daughters is to really, from a young age, talk to them about the importance of finding a balance and maybe even trying to learn some tools and teaching them tools on how to regulate their nervous system. So what I mean by that is, okay, why are getting to the root of why are they feeling this pressure? And really teaching them that their worth is not directly tied to how productive they are or their achievements. I think that that's something that I see a lot in high achieving women and that I saw a lot in myself for a very long time, where it was like, if I'm not productive, then I'm not really worthy of XYZ, right? Or it's
Mhm.
a lot of like worthiness tied to productivity. For a long time, I didn't know how to relax. Like relaxing, like sitting and just chilling, watching Netflix. All I could think about was like, okay, I need to be doing XYZ, XYZ. Like I need to be doing all these things and just go through a list of things that I could be doing instead to make myself feel good about it. And I see this in all of my clients. And if I could, like, if I think back to, okay, teenage Nikki, for example, there were similarities. There was like, okay, I need to be, if I'm not doing homework, then I need to be reading. And if I'm not reading, then I need to be helping around the house. And if I'm not helping around the house, it's like this guilt that would come
Mhm.
up. And my dad did try talking to me many times. Um, and he would sit with me and he would say, "Hey, I see that you're very anxious. What's going on?" And that's something my dad was really, really good about, and he still is till this day. Like, he would identify for me the things that I didn't necessarily have the awareness to identify in myself. He would identify the anxiety, he would identify the depression, and he wouldn't necessarily use those terms, especially in South America. Mental health things are very taboo, so, I think my dad and his family kind of broke that, and he did talk to me about it, not necessarily like, "I see you that you're depressed, or I see these signs that you're depressed." But he would say, "You're not acting like yourself. You're usually more cheerful. You're usually a little bit more calm. Like, what's going on?" And so
Mhm.
I think that's a part of the advice is if you notice these characteristics in your daughter as a father, it's just opening up the conversation and asking her the questions like, "Hey, these are the things that I'm noticing. Like, do you want to talk to me? Like, what's going on?" And sometimes the immediate answer might be, "I don't know." And that's okay. And this is a coaching question you can use from me is, well, if you did know, if you could guess, what is it?
Hmm.
And you're going to see that things are going to start kind of coming up and like, well, they might tell you a story, something that might be very like surface level. But I think as a dad, it's always leading with curiosity. And this is what I do in my coaching. And this is what helps. It's like lead with curiosity, ask questions, and just listen. It's not
Mhm.
about fixing. It's not about trying to find a solution for them. It's like, oh, well, maybe if you just did, maybe if you just did a little bit of meditation or you did some yoga, like don't look for the solution for them. Let them find it themselves. But lead with curiosity, ask the questions, notice when there's a difference in their behavior. And when you notice that it starts to impact them, I think that's important to step in as a dad.
I love that. I
Yeah.
think it's always so important to be that person that your daughter can come to with anything and kind of have that open communication rule. And the way that you achieve that is by asking those open-ended questions and allowing your daughter to speak out her feelings and feel heard and seen and validated. And I feel like for the high pressure and high achieving women, a lot of the times we do need to talk about it. We need to talk about our feelings, and we have so much going on internally. As you said, this is not an external pressure most of the time, it's all internal. And if we can release that pressure by talking about how we're feeling, it helps reduce that anxiety that we're like self creating, right? And a lot of, anxiety and depression comes from uncertainty and these the unknown. And I think, especially for young daughters whose future is completely unknown, and there's all these different paths that they can go on, there's different careers, there different colleges, who they're going to marry. There's all these questions that young girls have. And for the ones who put all the pressure on themselves, it's so important to be able to talk about that. And I love that your dad kind of helped you name some of those feelings and just by asking the right questions and helping you think about, maybe I have been feeling a little bit different recently and just kind of guiding you through how to feel better. And yeah, sometimes it's not giving the solutions because I think, I talk a lot about this, but men are so good at finding the solutions and providing solutions, which is great. But for women who are experiencing an emotional situation, we don't need the answer. We need to release our feelings and kind of come to that answer ourselves, but through the process of communication and understanding what's going on internally. And so as a father, you can do that just by being a sounding board and by being aware. And I think that's another thing that stood out to me about what you just said about your dad is he was aware of what was going on in your life. He paid attention because a lot of dads can miss those signs. Teenage girls can hide anxiety and depression really easily. And if you're not paying attention to your daughter, you might not understand what she's going through. And if she's putting a lot of pressure on herself early, yeah, it can absolutely lead to burnout and all kinds of negative feelings that come with it. But um, helping her understand that she can give herself grace, by again asking the right questions, letting her express her feelings, and kind of guiding her to what's important in life, I think is the main thing. Because it's so easy to get like caught up in the now,
Mhm. Mm.
and feel like this is everything. Like this test means everything. It's
Yeah.
like, it doesn't. I mean, I think back at how many nights I
Yeah.
stayed up like studying and like stressing out about this math exam or, social studies or whatever. And it's like, realistically, that was just a little blip in my life so far, but it
So true.
felt so immense, right?
Yeah.
Um, and just like, as a father and being so logical and just really good with reason, you can help her kind of understand the bigger picture by saying, well, is this really going to impact your life like long term? And even just posing those kinds of questions and allowing her to feel the feelings and recognize that, what, this isn't something that needs extreme stress right now, I think is good. And I guess I would just finish by saying like, I think there's a lot of power to being a high achieving woman. And I would say, like, from my perspective, my advice would not be to, like, shut that element of her down,
Mhm.
but more so, like, help her find that balance of being that girl that's authentically her because that's how she's wired to be, but also helping her recognize, like, what's important in life and where she can, improve maybe some of the other things that she needs to find that balance so that she doesn't get burnt out and can continue to be that high achieving, successful woman that she really is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not about I love you, like, hit it right exactly, like, bullseye. It's not about trying to change that from about your daughter, about the woman, right? It's like, that's how she is. It's ingrained in her, like, I'm still that person, like, even now as a mom, I'm like, I could see the high achieving coming in. I'm just, like, cooking for my daughter, and I'm, like, doing all these things and just trying to be the best mom possible, and that's just these characteristics are part of my personality, and I don't think they're ever gonna go away, but it really, as you said, is about finding that balance, and something that my dad did a lot for me was just helping me realize what was worth stressing about or focusing my energy on and what wasn't. Um, there's something that came up to in my mind when you were talking about like, you know, how just having the conversation with your daughter or asking the right questions can be very impactful. Specifically, when you're talking about the math test, like, oh my God, endless tests, exams where I was like studying, cramming, crying, not eating, and all these things. And I was thinking about a very pivotal point in my life that actually led me to this career path. My background is in neuroscience and psychology. I had a plan to go get my PhD as a high achieving eldest daughter would. I
Of course,
had
naturally.
studied, yeah, naturally. I had studied a lot. I graduated from UC San Diego. I was working in a neuroscience lab for a while, and I moved back in from San Diego. I moved back to LA with my parents, and it was to help them out financially. It just made more sense for us to be like, three incomes versus just them two trying to make ends meet. So I had gone into a job that was not related at all to what I was doing, but I still had this goal. I was like, I still need to go get my PhD. And 2020 hit. And I remember talking to my dad. I was having a complete meltdown. I was just crying. And he walks in on me crying in the kitchen. He's like, are you okay? Like, what's happening? What's going on? And I was just like, I just don't know what to do. And I had been studying for like this exam that I had to take in order to to be able to apply for a PhD program and all these things. And I'm like, I'm studying and I just don't even know if this is the path for me. Like, I'm going to have to be in school for 6 years. And then after I graduate, it's like 3 years of, I have to get my license and then I have to do like another 3 years of something. And I was just, doing the math in my head. And at the time, I was also looking for love. Like I was 20, how old was I? 26 and 25, 26. And I was like, I don't want to be like in my mid 30s and just starting to find someone, or like, what if I end up being like, I don't find anyone until I'm in like my late 50s and I want to be a mom. And so I was just spiraling so hard, okay, about my life, about what I should do. And I was like, I'm looking at all these PhD programs and I'm like, financially, I can't do it. I don't like, we come from a lower socioeconomic status. Like I always had to, kind of really do school on my own, financial aid, all the things. And I was stressing about finances for PhD. I didn't want to go into debt. So I'm telling him all these things, just literally like throw word vomit onto my dad. And he's just like sitting there listening, nodding his head. And I said, and there's this other part of me that just thinks like, is this even the path that I need to go on? Should I just do something else? And he looked at me and he said, let's talk worst case scenario. I was like, okay. So we walked through all my worst case scenarios in my mind. He sat there. I think this was a conversation that was like 3 hours. Okay. So he listened to me talk about worst case scenario for each road I could have taken in my life. And he looked at me and he said, you already have a degree in psychology and neuroscience. You understand a lot about the brain, but you're also really good with people. And I've seen how people come and help you. People come to you for advice and you guide them all the time. He's like,
Mhm.
not just friends. Like, I've seen you do it with strangers. I've seen you have these conversations. He's like, is there something you can do with your degree where you could start making money now? Like, you can maybe have like a business with it or something. And then later on, if you decide that you want to get your PhD or your master's, then you just do that. And I looked at him. I was like, I never thought about that before. And so then I started researching. I was like, what can I do? And then I had been naturally following coaches, and I've been in the self-development world for a very long, long time, since I was like 13, 14. Like one of the first books I read was The Secret, and it was just like onward from there. And that's what got me interested in psychology, understanding how people work, understanding the brain. That's why I took this career path, right? Or like studied what I studied. And after days, maybe like a week or two of like researching, I was like, Dad, I think I can create a business. Like I think I can start a business as a coach. And he's like, good, you should do it. And just him listening to me and asking the question and talking to me about worst case scenarios, talking to me about what I want, has led me down this path, which was, I think, very impactful in that, oh, I need to do these things. I need to get my PhD. I need to. He was just like, hold on, let's talk about like what would really be good for you in your life. And, now I'm 32. I have a daughter and family and a career that I'm excited about and that I love. And it's honestly, that was like the pivotal conversation. And it was with him.
Oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
love that story. And,
Yeah.
I always think about life with these different, like, I'm a visual person, right? So I visualize all these different paths. And there's, some windy roads or whatever, but it's kind of like you're on this one path. And then there's these times where the path like splits and you're either going to take a left or a right. And those moments are major defining moments, and that conversation with your dad was one of those moments. Like, the day I met my husband was one of those moments, right? Or the day I decided to take the job that led me to meet my husband. And everyone has those kinds of moments that completely change their trajectory forever. But I think that moment was so huge for you, and it was because your dad was so intentional about sitting down with you and was able to walk you through those different scenarios and help you with logic and reason when you're in a very emotional state. And I think that's such a beautiful thing that a lot of dads and men in general have the ability to do for women in their life, whether it's their wives or their daughters. We are wired to be emotional humans. And a lot of times when we're in these stressful states, just like the one that you were describing, where you feel all the weight of all these different things and the unknown of your future and all these pressures, and you're just kind of in this anxious spiral, it is an incredible thing to be able to have a man who can help you through logic and reason, not in a condescending or here's what you need to do kind of way, but by helping walk you through, because they see it, like they see the answer. For them, a lot of times it's clear, like, oh, you should not go to, get your PhD and you should become a coach. Like your dad might have known that all along, but he helped you walk through the different scenarios to help you understand that there's alternative ways, and through doing that, that whole exercise released your anxiety, it released your stress, you felt heard and taken care of. And at the end of the day, your dad was basically telling you, hey, it's going to be okay, Nikki. You've got this. And that's what you needed in that moment, is just that, hey, it's going to be okay. And I think that's really important for dads to remember, because you have a powerful gift, and women have other amazing gifts. And when you can come together in these kinds of conversations and use your strengths, it can have a profound impact, and it completely changed your life trajectory, as we just discovered. So, yeah, I just think that's wonderful. And I think that should be a good reminder for dads to help their daughters think through these situations by talking about worst case scenarios, or using some logic. Like, one thing that I found really helpful when I was unsure of my career path, was writing down all the skills that I have. So all my strengths, all the things that like are more of my weaknesses, or things that I didn't even want to do, right? And then things that I loved about my job in finance, and things that I didn't like about my job in finance. And I kind of just looked across the board, and I realized everything that I loved about finance was people, relationships, connection, working with my clients, and nothing to do with finance. Everything that I actually didn't like was like the high pressure of numbers, and like the implications that it can have if you mess something up, if you mess up a number, and all these different things. And so I think that's another good thing that dads can do for high achieving women, is kind of like help their daughters think through for their career path, at least for these kinds of conversations, help their daughters think through their strengths and weaknesses, and interests, and things that they're not interested in, and like help guide them. There's also like lots of career quizzes you can take online, and I'm sure you can even use AI to kind of like come up with some fun job options for you. But I think it's important for young women to feel like everything's gonna be okay, especially if they're the high achievers, and that they will figure it out, because that's who they are. But sometimes they just need a little hug and a little bit of guidance, and love. So yeah, no, that's amazing.
It's the love, the guidance, and the redirection. It's like, hey,
Yes.
and something I think is really important, and I think it's a distinguishing factor between being the, just saying like, hey, this is what you need to do, versus like actually being helpful to them finding a solution, is the delivery. There's a difference between you should do XYZ versus, well, what would it look like if, and then you bring in a scenario, right? It's always about the delivery. And when you're trying to help your daughter, especially, and I do like that we're talking about this career path, because I I've talked to a couple of like teenage girls in the past couple of years. Like I worked with well, I had an intern for a while. Her name's Isha, if she's listening to this. Love her. For her 4 years in high school, and she's in college now, and is with the school Miramar here locally. And that was one of the things we talked about. It's like career path. What do I do? And it really does come down to asking the right questions, but also letting, like, being a guide, right? So as a dad, like, as you said, if you're asking the right questions, serving as a guide, there are, yeah, use AI if you want, but like there's tools that you can use. Like, I love the fact that you're like, okay, a list of what I like, what I don't like, and just kind of going through that. But it is always a delivery. Like, there's something so beautiful about bringing in that masculine energy so your daughter can be in her feminine, so she can feel like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, she can relax, she can be soft, like, especially with high achievers, right? Always I'm usually in my masculine, right? Where it's just like I'm going, doing, like always
Mm-hmm.
on the go. And so to have a dad, a man in your life that can be like, hey, I'm gonna hold you in this. Like, it's okay for you to be vulnerable. It's okay for you to cry, to release your emotions in any way, shape, or form that you feel is right for you right now. And we're gonna just pivot, and we're gonna guide you through this, instead of being like, "Okay, here's a solution. Why are you crying?" Like, that's not going to
Right.
help anyone. So I think I wanted to highlight that because it's really important when you're having a conversation like this with a teenage girl, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all really great advice for just how to navigate those conversations with your high achieving daughter. But I know you have lots of other great life lessons and advice for dads through the stories that you have with your own dad. So let's talk more about your amazing dad. I do talk a lot on this podcast about the impact that fathers have on their choices of men and the expectations that they set for how they should be treated by men, how we should be treated by men. So I would love to hear more about your relationship with your dad and how that has impacted your relationships with, romantic partners or even your husband.
Yeah. Well, I love this question because we'll get to it, but my dad literally after the first date with my now husband, he looked at me, he's like, "That's the guy you're gonna marry." Daddy knows, but my in high school and college, you know, I had a couple relationships and there were some where I was cheated on, and that was really, really hard. I think, like, for me, betrayal, I think for most people, it's just like a difficult thing to navigate. And one of the first times it happened, and every time after, my dad was always there for me, but there were conversations that we had that really helped me understand that it wasn't my fault. Um, when I got cheated on each time, I always kind of started to, when I say each time, I mean, it's not like I was cheated on 10 times, but it was enough to like, you know, where it was repetitive enough by sometimes the same person, and then it happened by different people, where it started to impact my self-esteem.
Hmm.
And my dad would sit down and he'd have conversations with me. Each time he'd have to remind me of this, but it's okay. Repetition is key to learning something and really having it engraved in your mind. But one of the things that he would say to me, he was always very honest. And one thing that I love about my dad is that he was never ashamed to talk about his past and his life. He's always just very open with me about who he was, and especially as like a teenager or a young adult. And he said to me, he said, "Listen, like I wasn't, can I cuss on this podcast?"
Yeah.
Okay. He's like, "I was kind of a dick." He's like, "Sometimes like I had a great girl and I would, he's like, I wasn't faithful." He's like, "And I could talk to you about this perspective," right? So he would talk to me about the perspective of the other person. He's like, "It has absolutely nothing to do with you." And he would talk to me about the type of person he was then. And he would tell me, he's like, "I was immature. I wouldn't take things seriously." He's like, "It's not that I didn't care about her. I just didn't care." He's like, "I cared more about myself." It's like he didn't care enough about, the relationship or whatever it was. And he's like, at the end of the day, like, I didn't deserve to be with her. And I mean, again, this is me translating from Spanish to English in my mind. And there was a lot more that he would share with me about the past. And sometimes he'd have to be very honest with me. Like if I was dating a guy, he usually was very like reserved about his opinions about the guys unless I asked him, like, "So what do you think about so and so?" But there were a couple times where he's like, "Listen, I usually don't say anything, but like I need to be very honest with you." And he would just bring things up very in a soft way, but very honest way. Like there was one relationship I had where I had gotten really, really sick and I was in the hospital. And this guy that I was dating, he was in a band and he had band practice like literally down the street from the hospital where I was. And I had been sick for a couple of days and like he didn't show up, like he didn't come over, like nothing. And I lived with my parents at the time, so like my dad was watching all of this. And um when I was in the hospital, he didn't show up. And when I came back from the hospital, he didn't show up for a couple of days and then like eventually came. And my dad looked at me. He's just like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "He does not care about you." He's like, "You were in the hospital. You've been sick for weeks and he hasn't come to like even bring you soup, to see you, to just be with you." He's like, "None of it." He's like, "You deserve better than that." And I was like, "You're right." So he would always, the impact he had on me is that he'd always remind me what my worth was. And in the
Hmm.
moments when I got cheated on, he'd remind me, like, it's not your fault. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. Like, and he would remind me as many times as I needed it because especially when you're in that space of heartbreak, like I'm sure a lot of people are the same, but like you have to I had to keep having the conversation over and over and over again because that was my way of processing it. Asking like, why did he do that? Why would he cheat on me? What did I do wrong? Is she prettier than me? Like all of these things. And my dad just every time so patiently would just keep having the conversations with me. And he'd hug me and I'd cry and he'd say, it's okay. It's going to be okay. There was even a time where I was, I think I was in like my early 20s. And I was like, Dad, the last conversation I had was like a European guy that I dated for like 3 years. It was like long distance, all the things. He saw my heartbreak slowly. It was like death by a thousand cuts.
Oh.
And he said to me, he's like, it's going to be okay every time. He's like, it's going to be okay. You're going to find the right person. I was like, Dad, I think I just need to freeze my eggs. I was dead serious. I looked at him. I was like, I need to freeze my eggs. He looked at me. He's like, okay, tell me more. I was like, I think I was like, what, 20, 23? I was like, I'm 23. Like all the men I'm meeting, like they're just not it. I'm like, I need to just freeze my eggs because what if I don't find anyone and then I do want to be a mom and then like I'll just, get like a donor and then that's that. Like I'll be like a single mom with a kid and whatever. And he looked at me and he laughed. He's like, you're not gonna have to freeze your eggs. And he's like, watch, you're gonna meet someone sooner than you think, sooner than you realize. I was like, okay, Dad. Well, he was right because
Yeah.
2020, I was 25 and I met my now husband. So this is the part I wanted to get to. I went on a date. I was set up with him by one of my friends, and I didn't know much about him. Like she just said she works at at the time she was an assistant at a hair salon, and he would get his hair cut there all the time. And she just called me. She's like, Nikki, there's this cute guy that comes into the salon. Like, I think you guys should go on a date. And I was like, I don't know. Again, I was in this, I'm freezing my eggs. I'm not going to date anyone unless they sweep me off my feet type of mindset. So this was like late 2019. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. And then she insisted again, like 2 months later. Like, he's coming back in for a haircut. I'm going to just give him your number. I was like, fine, whatever, if you insist. So she did. He texted me, went to a Kings game. Again, I lived with my parents and my brother. So I come back home from the date and all three of them are sitting in the living room, like waiting for me so that I could tell them how the date went. And because again, I hadn't been dating during this time. Like it had been a couple of years. And I look at them, I'm like, what's up, guys? And they're like, so how did it go? So I told them about the date and I was like, it went great. He took me to a Kings game and my brother's a huge Kings fan. He's like, I already like him. This is great. I'm like, okay. And then I was just telling them about him and my dad looks at me and he's like, I think this is the guy. I think this is the guy you're going to marry. I was like, Dad, come on. I'm like, it's one date. You can't predict that from one date. He's like, I don't know. There's just something. And at the time, I was 26. So my husband and I have a big age gap. I was 26. He was 40. So that for me, especially when I would tell people like, oh yeah, like, and they'd ask his age, they're like, oh, he's too old for you. My dad was the only one. He's like, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. He's like, this is a guy for you. Like, you need someone older. He's like, all the guys you were dating that were younger, like, no. He's like, you need someone
Yeah.
older. I was like, okay. And well, fast forward almost 6 years. He is the guy I married. He's the guy I had a kid with. And he also said to me, he said, he's going to be a good dad. He's like, the reason I know that is because at the time he had two French bulldogs. And he's like, the way he treats those dogs, he's like, I can just tell he's going to be a great dad. And this is like when he first met them. So I didn't introduce my husband Jerome to my parents until like after 6 months of dating. I just wanted a little bit of privacy. But he was just like, yeah, he's like, he's going to be a great dad. He's going to be a great husband. And it's true. And I think it's crazy but also not that crazy that my dad was able to predict, like just from the first date. He's like, yep, that's him. That's the guy.
No. Well, it's
Yeah.
obvious that your dad pays attention to you
Yeah.
and knows what you need, knows what you like. And obviously, he was paying attention to Jerome too, because he was taking notes of all the things, like the way he treated his bulldogs. And I think that's an important note for dads. It's like, look at all the signs, and as a dad, as a guy, kind of the male brain better than anyone, right? So when it comes to your daughter's potential partners, like look at who they are and kind of take notes of those kinds of things so that you can help guide her and help ask the right questions for her. Because yeah, no girl wants to be told, you know, point blank, don't date him or like he's bad or whatever. But maybe like, what are we doing? Like, what do you like about him? What's going on here? Tell me about the relationship and how you're feeling. Like those kinds of things um, are good conversation starters so that you can open the floor for conversation and allow her to maybe share things that she's actually feeling that she wouldn't have proactively brought up. And I think that's the main thing is like, even when your dad saw the guy who the one that was in the band and did not come to the hospital, like he knew that that wasn't the guy for you. And so he spoke up. And I think that there's definitely a time and a place for that. Like I think dads should be there for their daughters and be kind of like a, I don't want to say like guard dog because that's not exactly what I'm trying to say here. Let me think. Well, I just think that they should be protective of their daughters, and I think they naturally are protective of their daughters. But there's a way to kind of introduce these conversations so it doesn't feel like an attack on the daughter and an attack on her choice, of course. And so he did it with love and respect and basically like lifted you up and reminded you of your worth rather than like discounting your choice as to why you're dating him, right? Like he did it in a good way. And I think that's just like what I'm trying to say here is for dads to just be mindful of how they're speaking to their daughters about relationships because it can be really easy for us to hear something completely different than what you're saying and to kind of turn your words into an attack because we don't want to hear it and it feels you know rude or like overstepping, unless you do it the right way. So I think your dad did a wonderful job with that. And I think, again, just kind of asking those questions like, what are your favorite things about this man or, your partner or whatever, and kind of opening that conversation because sometimes those questions lead to the daughter wondering, yeah, what do I like about this person? Like, why am I even dating them, right?
Yeah.
But if you just say like they have zero redeeming qualities, then it's like, hey, don't talk about them like that. So, anyways, that's just kind of a side note. And then I also wanted to touch on the way that your dad handled the cheating situations. I think that is so, so important because unfortunately it does happen a lot. And, I've interviewed a lot of daughters who have gone through the same thing and their dads have been so supportive of them. And the common theme across the board is that their dads make sure the daughters know it has nothing to do with them. Because 100% of the time, we are spinning thinking about, am I not pretty enough? Am I not good enough? Like, does he not like me? Like, all these things that are within our control, we think, especially if we're the high achieving type, right? I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. We put so much pressure on ourselves to be this perfect version of us and we try to do everything right. And when it comes to a relationship, if we are cheated on, for us, that is quote unquote proof that we did something wrong. And I think as a father, this is your opportunity to have a conversation with your daughter and make sure that she knows it is not her fault and it has nothing to do with her and it has everything to do with him and his lack of respect for the relationship. Potentially, even, he thinks that she's too good for him. And this is like his way of compensating. Like that's a real thing too, right? There's all kinds of reasons that it happens. And it happens on both ends too, men and women and, all kinds of ways. And but with that said, I just think it's important for dads to, again, be mindful of how they're having these conversations and really like thinking about the daughter before having the conversations and maybe how she might interpret it and then delivering it in a way that's like open and inviting and kind and loving because that's how it's going to be received the best.
It's always a delivery every time, especially I think these pivotal conversations, all the ones we've even touched on, like career path, being cheated on, like all all of these really important points in a young girl's life, it's all about the delivery and giving them the space. I think this was something that was always very important for me and that I appreciated that my dad always did is like allowing me the space to be me and to feel my emotions however I needed to. Sometimes it was with anger, and sometimes that looked like taking the anger out on him even though he probably didn't deserve it, right? Or crying or whatever it looked like at the time, but it really always is about the delivery. And as I think about this, I don't want dads that are listening to this to be like, "Oh, well, I feel like then I have to walk on eggshells with my daughter," because it's not
Right.
that. I encourage dads to think about it differently. It's really about um like it's not eggshells. What's the word I'm trying to say? It's about curiosity, and that's what I've been saying. It's like leading with curiosity. So it's like if you take anything away from this, like, "Okay, how do I approach a difficult conversation with my daughter? Like, how do I support her?" Lead with love, lead with curiosity, listening ears. Like, that's it. Just listen, love, and be curious about her, about how she's feeling, about why she's feeling like that. And then everything will naturally flow. And there will always be a point in the conversation where you are going to be able to guide her into some type of solution together. It's not just you giving it to her, it's like a team thing where
Mhm.
because of the questions you're asking her, because of the way the conversation's flowing, it will just naturally get there. And really what's always been so powerful, and I hope dads can take away from this, is like daughters, especially the high achieving, is like you don't even have to be high achieving. I just think in general, like as women, we do tend to go to worst case scenario. And that is what anxiety is, right? You're like thinking about the future, about like all the ways that things could possibly go wrong. And sometimes just speaking it out loud takes away the power from that story and from like
Mhm.
the feeling of anxiety from that and the feeling of uncertainty of like, okay, well, if this worst case scenario played out, like, would it really be the worst thing ever? And the answer
Right.
most of the time is no. So, yeah.
That was a beautiful way to say it, and I think that summarizes our entire conversation. The one thing too I wanna say related to not walking on eggshells, I'm so glad you said that because I definitely do not want dads to feel that way, and the way that I think about it is you're learning to speak her language, and in order to speak her language, there's gonna be times where you say the wrong thing and, like, it comes off like an attack, right? But just pay attention to that response and then figure out how to navigate moving forward. Like, I've even noticed recently my husband has been saying, like, "Is there a possibility that blank?" And I noticed it last night. I was like, "Wait, he's been saying that a lot lately." And I like actually respond so well to it because it doesn't feel so like, "No, I think it's this," and it makes me feel like, "Hmm, actually, yeah, maybe that is true," rather than me being wrong, right? And I think that's something that he's learned works well with me, and I think for a dad, every daughter is gonna be different. The way that you can talk to her and speak to her so that she understands what you're saying and takes it the right way and everything just comes down to your relationship, and you have to kind of figure out what that is. But what we're doing in this conversation is giving you all the tools and perspective, especially from two high achieving daughters, as to what works best for us and what, has worked best with your clients too, so that you can go and take this and implement this with your daughter and see what sticks, what works best, and then continue to refine. But like you said, I mean, it comes down to listening and being curious and loving. And that relates to all of what I just said too. Like when you are being curious about her responses and being loving and, asking the right questions and everything, you're going to learn how to speak her language the best. And then once you get that down, I mean, everything just becomes easier, your relationship grows stronger, and, yeah, but it all starts with your intention, and I know that even just by listening to this podcast, you're doing the right thing, so Thank you. And thank you, Nikki. Is there anything else you'd like to finish off the podcast? Any final parting words of advice? You've given so much already, though.
Um, I think that if you are a dad and you are listening to this podcast, you're listening to this episode, you, you can tell you care, and the love is there, the intention is there, so it's all going to work out. It's all going to work out. And again, I'm just leaving them with the three L's. It's the listening, loving, and leading with curiosity. I think that's
I love it.
yeah,
Well,
that's how
thank
to
you,
approach it.
Nikki.
Thank
It's
you.
it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to have this conversation with you. I think it's an important conversation to have.
Thank you for tuning into Girl Dad, the podcast. If you found today's conversation helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow girl dad. I read every review and truly take your words to heart. To close out, remember, your intentional moments make lasting legacies. See you next week.